right, welcome everyone to Plant-Based Kidney Health. As always, I'm Dr. Sean Hashmi. My partner is Michele Crosmer. Michele, welcome back.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well. So Michele, we wanted to continue our conversation on proteinuria. So let's dive right into it. And let me start off with the first question here. And this is a continuation, guys. If you haven't watched part 1, we're going to have the link in the show notes for you guys. But really, there was a lot of information on what is proteinuria, how do you check for it. Today, we're going to dive into the nutrition side of it and how you treat it. So with that, Michele, when it comes to food and diet and nutrition, can you talk a little bit about, what can you do to increase or decrease from a food perspective when it comes to protein in the urine?
Yep. And one of the questions too, and I'll address that we got around this side of it that I think is a common misconception is people often ask, okay, I'm leaking all this protein into my urine. Do I therefore need to eat more protein in my diet? And, the answer for that is no. I mean, it's not this like if you eat more protein, it'll replace the protein that's lost in the urine. And if you listen back to that previous episode, you had talked about these, primary and secondary diseases that can cause it, an inflammation and high blood pressure and all these other things that can contribute to protein leaking in the urine. So actually the opposite is true, is that a huge part of nutrition therapy for people with kidney disease, and again, we're not talking about dialysis right now, but is a lower protein diet. And what we find is that a lower protein diet actually can help to reduce the protein in the urine. It helps potentially reducing inflammation, pressure on the kidneys, and especially lower protein that doesn't contain like red meats and processed meats is a big part of that. And so, and then of course, when we do a lower protein diet and we can help reduce proteinuria, then we can help prolong the life of the kidneys and hopefully slow the progression of kidney disease. So a low protein diet is part of that. And we do have another episode on protein specifically in the diet and kind of general ranges. So if you guys, reference back to that and listen to that. So that's one part of it. The other part of it too is sodium intake. And the hard thing with diet and proteinuria is that there's everything seems to be debatable, right? Like, okay, it shows it here, but it might not show it elsewhere. But ultimately, from the standpoint of whether it's less pressure on the kidneys or it's, lowering blood pressure, which in turn is helping reduce proteinuria, a lower sodium diet is helping with that. So lower protein, low sodium diet. The other thing that's really important, and this is where the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet come in, is fiber content in the diet. And so especially in people with, of course, high blood pressure, but also diabetic kidney disease, fiber and improving our gut microbiome and preventing gut dysbiosis is a huge part of reducing overall inflammation. And inflammation is so key with helping to reduce proteinuria. And there's a lot of things that can contribute to inflammation. And that's why a lot of these like autoimmune or inflammatory diseases can lead to high levels of protein leaking in the urine. But from a food and nutrition standpoint, we really want to target gut health and then things that increase, and we had talked last episode about, diets that are high in refined sugars or added sugars and fructose or concentrated amounts of fructose. Like those are things that all can contribute to more inflammation and then potentially more proteinuria. And this was actually someone had made a comment not related to proteinuria, but fiber in general, and was asking like, well, if I just take a fiber supplement, then will that help diabetes and also help, the kidney disease? And some people might need to utilize the fiber supplement, but ultimately we want to be getting that fiber in the form of whole plant foods because one, we get other antioxidants and vitamins and minerals and nutrients along with it, but we're consuming it in a form that's, it's the food form of it, right? It's not this hey, we're taking this fiber and we're concentrating it and you take it. If that's not part of a diet that's also promoting, that's also anti-inflammatory and is full of whole plant foods, then that fiber supplement does not have the same benefit on your gut bacteria and your gut microbiome that if it's actually coming from food. It's a lot cheaper if it actually comes from food too, and then you eat it as part of your meal. So that's all part of it. And I think just kind of in general, and when we think about controlling blood pressure, controlling blood sugar, reducing inflammation, improving gut health, all of those things help all aspects of kidney health, but even proteinuria. And, and so part of that's whole food, plant-based or plant predominant, lower in sodium, less highly processed food, less protein in general, but especially substituting those whole plant proteins for the animal proteins. All of that together helps with overall kidney disease and decreasing uremic toxins, nitrogenous waste, reducing, glomerular pressure and the workload of the kidneys, as well as helping with proteinuria.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And Michele, as people talk about like food choices and stuff like that, and we're talking about proteinuria, a lot of people oftentimes they jump to diets. Is there any particular foods they want to try to stay away from in terms of proteinuria?
I think, one of the realms of that I would say is like red and processed meats, very highly processed, very salty foods. I think a big part is like we think of, sometimes people like to argue over, okay, is low sodium 1,500 milligrams or is it less than 2,300? And the thing is most people are consuming like 4,500 milligrams a day, and it's coming in the form of like fast food, restaurant food. And so those are things that we would want to limit or stay away from. And then in general, just things that can be more inflammatory. So again, that's added sugar. I think that's something that, I don't know, my clients would probably say I'm a broken record with, but we oftentimes don't think of how important avoiding like high fructose corn syrup or like highly concentrated amounts of fructose and getting it from actual fruit and not having all the added sugar in the diet, which can be very inflammatory, that the role that can just play on kidney health in general. So I'd say those are things that we would want to be, limiting and avoiding. And then a high protein diet is something that we don't want to be having. And excessive protein intake, high protein diets, especially when it's coming from all or mostly animal proteins, those are things that we would want to stay away from and be substituting more of the plant proteins, getting plenty of fruits and vegetables and fiber in the diet.
Agreed.
Okay. And yeah, I know I probably said that really quickly. So, but yeah, so I think that's the main things from a food standpoint. We can always, maybe in future episodes, if people have more questions on that, we can dive into more things. And the other thing too, I'd be cautious of with that is sometimes with, I think you can like Google and search things sometimes, and like things will come up like this specific food is inflammatory and causes, and then we contribute that to proteinuria. And I think overall it's looking at your diet, the quality of your diet, and then the quantity of the protein that you're consuming and the type of protein you're consuming, as well as just the quality of food in general that you're consuming is key. And I know you're going to dive into, we're going to talk more about medications and that treatment for proteinuria, but a lot of times these things work together. Like if someone just has proteinuria and they're just doing the medication and they're not addressing anything from a food and nutrition standpoint, you don't typically see the same benefits as if you're doing both together and they both support each other. And so I think that's where it's just a reminder that you need your nephrologist and you also need your renal dietitian, and they can work together and, and potentially have a bigger impact and reduce the protein in the urine more. So having said that, then how, from a medication standpoint, how do we treat proteinuria?
Yeah, so this is another one of those things where I think you guys will need to come back and reference this a couple of times to get all of the pearls from this topic. So there's a few caveats you got to know. As you start the medications, the nutrition becomes even more important. So for example, if you want to have the medications work effectively, you must, not you should, not you really want to, but you must reduce salt. In fact, with one of the medication category, the ACE or ARB, what we call the renin-angiotensin system inhibitors, you can make them almost twice as effective simply by reducing the sodium intake to what we recommend. And what we recommend is getting less than 2.3 grams. So if you cut down the amount of salt you're eating per day, you can make these medications twice as effective. Number two, is you have to cut down your saturated fat intake. Very, very important, because the more saturated fat intake you get, the more you're going to spill protein in the urine. So what are the two foods out there? Well, not two foods, but what are the new foods out there, the new kids on the block? So this is just me saying it, is all of your now plant-based meals that are coming out that are sort of the fast food varieties, right? These are your plant-based burgers and everything else that's coming out. So keep that in mind as you're looking at all of the grocery shelves that are being stocked that have really high amounts of salt and are really high amounts of saturated fat in them. For kidney patients, you have to be very, very mindful. Now, why does all this stuff matter? Because in the first part of this episode, we said protein in the urine is your greatest marker for how fast you're going to progress to end-stage renal disease or dialysis, and the greatest likelihood of you progressing to death. So think about that for a second. We make a very, very big deal about protein in the urine. In the MDRD study, which is one of the landmark studies we always talk about, they showed that each 1 gram per day reduction in protein excretion, meaning 1 gram per day reduction in how much protein you were spilling in the first 4 months, you were able to slow down the rate of decline in your kidney function by about 1 mil. So every year, if you have no kidney disease whatsoever, you're going to lose a little bit of your kidney function going on. And usually that number is a little bit about 0.25 to about 0.5 mils per year. And it depends on what you're doing. But if you have kidney disease and if you're spilling protein in the urine going on, that number can be 1, 2, 3, or 4 mils. Now imagine if your kidney function is like 60 and you're losing 1, 2, 3, 4 every year, how quickly are you going to progress down to 15 or 10? Very, very quickly. So the fact that you can actually lower this simply by lowering the protein you're spilling, just by doing that one tiny change, you can lower this by 1 mil. That's a massive drop. So what are the things? So the first category of medication are your renin-angiotensin system inhibitors. Those are your ACE inhibitors or your ARBs. Some names are things like enalapril, benazepril, lisinopril. The ARBs are things like losartan, right? Those are the common medication, or anything that ends in an artan or pril would be the medications that fall. And what they do is they lower the pressure inside the glomerulus. What is the glomerulus? That's the ball inside the kidney. There's so many tiny balls inside the kidney. So if you see that, where they actually have an impact is they can lower the protein by about 30 to 35%. Now, you can't use both at the same time. You can't use an ACE inhibitor and an ARB, because when you do, the side effects become too much. And some of the main side effects are the potassium can go up, and the fact that the kidney function can actually decline while you're on these medications. The good news is when you stop them, the kidney function goes right back to where it was before. So don't get alarmed that when your doctor starts them on this, if you were 35%, you go down to 30%, not that big of a deal going on. If you stop it, it goes back up. The next category is your calcium channel blockers. These are specifically a subtype called the non-dihydropyridine. What are they? Diltiazem and verapamil. These are also very powerful because they will also lower your protein by about 30%. So you have the ACE inhibitors, you have the ARBs, and you have the non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers, diltiazem and verapamil. Side effects, swelling, they can cause constipation going on. So now those are your tools. Then you have other things that are called mineralocorticoid receptor antagonists. These are your spironolactone and eplerenone. Same thing, they can cause your potassium to go up. Now notice all the stuff we've talked about so far are actually good for blood pressure. So these are really blood pressure medications that also lower protein in the urine. The downside is they have side effects like raising your potassium or swelling or constipation. The other thing is none of them are going to lower your protein 100%. So if you know they're not going to lower your protein and get rid of it completely, you still need the diet. You still need the weight loss. You're going to need all of those things that we've been talking about all this time, because none of these things by themselves are going to fix it. Now, if you have diabetes, a lot of the newer diabetes drugs actually have really powerful effects on the kidneys. So the first class is the SGLT2 inhibitors. These ones are used to essentially make you pee out some sugar, so they'll lower your A1C, but they will also help your heart. They will also help lower the protein in the urine. And these are names like canagliflozin, empagliflozin, dapagliflozin, all the flozins. So if you hear the name gliflozin, you know you're hearing about an SGLT2 inhibitor. They also have side effects. All of them do. So things like you can get urinary tract infections. You can have fractures from them. You can have yeast infections from them. On the flip side, they can cause weight loss, about 2 to about 5% or so. But SGLT2 inhibitors can lower protein in the urine. So in my own practice, I use SGLT2 inhibitors plus the other medications like the ACE inhibitors or ARBs, and I can get really good control in lowering the protein in the urine. On top of that, we have two other categories that are available. DPP4, which is dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors. Don't remember the name. It's DPP4 inhibitors. DPP4 inhibitors I don't really use because I have a much better option, which are the GLP-1 agonists. But DPP4 inhibitors are the gliptins, so saxagliptin, linagliptin, and a few other gliptins. They're weight neutral. I don't really see what the advantage of them is. So instead of them, I use the GLP-1 agonists. These guys have a lot of benefits. They can lower protein in the urine and they cause marked weight loss. One of them called semaglutide, which came out last year around June or so. I use that in my own practice. That can cause between 15 to 17% weight loss. So as part of my obesity practice and nephrology practice, I use that in my patients who need to lose weight. And what I find is, especially the ones who have kidney disease and have a lot of protein in the urine, once we get them on a plant-focused diet and we're doing everything and we use a combination of medications, we can have patients losing 100 plus pounds with all of this going on. Their proteinurias, where they were spilling 8,000 plus milligrams, are going down to 1,000 or less. In all of the years I've been doing this, this was something that I could never achieve before, that now I have the tools to be able to achieve. So these new agents, such as the GLP-1s, are really a game changer. They are expensive and they are injections. But next year, they're going to start going generic and the prices are going to come down. Then there are immunosuppressive agents. And those are really if you have a disease where the immune system is attacking yourself. So those would be agents like Cellcept or mycophenolate mofetil, cyclosporin, tacrolimus, prednisone, or Cytoxan or cyclophosphamide. All of those are only given when it's a really specific disease where your body or your immune system is overactive and it's really attacking yourself. The goal here is what we always want to do is we want to target the specific disease. If you have diabetes, what I want to do is find a drug that treats diabetes and kidneys. If you have heart disease, my goal is to find a drug that treats heart disease and kidneys. And now we have that. In the past, the problem was we would do polypharmacy. So what would happen is a patient might be on 10 different types of medications. What are the odds that you're remembering to take 10 different pills multiple times a day? And the odds were you probably weren't. So our goal is to give you the least amount of pills. So remember, if you were to think of life as a pyramid, diet, exercise, sleep, stress, all of that is the foundation. Lifestyle medicine is always the foundation. But on top of that foundation, oftentimes we do need other stuff. And if we do, please, if you need medication, use medications. We have come a long ways in terms of what we're able to do. And so if you need that help, that's what we try to do, is offer that help. But we don't want to give you medications first. Our job, and this is why Michele and I are here, is we want to be able to steer you into that first step of the pyramid, which is the lifestyle step. Start there, get healthy, get there, but also be aware of what are those other things you have to do when it comes to kidney disease, so you know what the right questions are when you speak to your own kidney team. That's why when we say we can't give you individual advice, it's not because we don't want to. What we want to do is empower you so that when you do speak with your own doctors, you have the right questions to be able to go and ask.
And can you, since you're, obviously specialize in obesity as well, what is it about carrying extra weight and obesity that contributes to, the increased pressure and proteinuria where losing weight is beneficial?
Yeah, so the first one is just mechanical pressure, right? So as you create all of this pressure, it puts pressure on the kidneys, and that in itself causes there to be a breakdown going. Second is as it does that, what ends up happening is you actually start to create this cascade where the renin-angiotensin system starts to get revved up. And so you create all this pressure, and instead of the kidneys saying, oh, that's fine, this person has extra weight, so I need to deliver more blood to the kidneys, it does the opposite. It starts to clamp down. And as it starts to clamp down, it starts to get more fibrosis. And there's all this fibrosis and scarring that starts to occur in the kidney. So it's the opposite of what you expect to happen. So more central obesity you have, you actually have more renin-angiotensin aldosterone system occurring inside the kidney. As a result, you have more intraglomerular pressure, or in other words, pressure inside the kidney, more scarring you have inside the kidney going on. It's the complete opposite of what you would really think logically what ought to happen. So as you take that pressure off of the kidneys, whatever the cells are left over, they can survive longer. I always give this analogy. The very first car I ever had was this 78 or 79 Chevy Chevette. It was the oldest car that it got passed down from everybody before my dad ever bought it. And he bought it because the guy was literally, this car will break down on you 1 billion times. I would have to press the brake a mile away. I remember when I had to sell it, and I had to give it to the junkyard, and I got $100 for it or something. I had to drive it in reverse because it would not drive forward. So I always use that analogy in the sense that the more that I would drive it, the more it would break down. Well, that's our bodies, right? Our bodies are designed, and our kidneys are designed that way. So the more you weigh, the more it has to clean out all of those waste products. And our kidney cells, we're born with about 1 million kidney cells in each kidney. And all that happens is they die every year. So if you want them to last longer, make them work less. That's it. And if you want to give them a raise, eat more plants. So you can give them a raise and you can make them work less. Just like any worker out there. They want more vacation and better pay.
Yep. I love that. I love that analogy. And then last kind of question to wrap all of this up. So let's say someone is starting to make food, dietary, lifestyle changes, and also they're being given medication by the nephrologist. How quickly can they expect to see changes in how much protein they're leaking in the urine?
Yeah, generally speaking, most of the data is done around 3 to 4 months. So most of the study, they end up measuring around 3 to 4 months. In my own clinical practice, we measure around 3 to 4 months as well. And that's where we start to see the changes going on. People will say usually about a month later, they'll start to come back and say, yeah, my urine is less foamy, or I'm having less swelling. That's another thing is, when they're spilling so much protein, their cholesterol is through the roof, and their legs will get very, very swollen. One of the things they'll notice is as the protein in the urine goes down, their swelling in their legs starts to go down, because all of a sudden, all of that fluid that's stuck is now able to be controlled better. And there's an entire, we'll do an episode on the whole oncotic pressure and hydrostatic pressure. It's really fascinating stuff, but really all of that fluid inside your body, when the protein is not in your blood vessels, it actually leaks out into the tissues. And there's nothing to really drive that fluid back into the blood vessels. So as a result, it sits, and by gravity, it ends up in your ankles. So when you're able to slow down the leakage of that protein, the fluid is then able to shift back inside the blood vessels. So you can start to see those changes in just a matter of weeks. But generally speaking, we start to really see the results in blood test in about 3 months.
Yeah. And that's, for more than just proteinuria, I think that's important to remember, is a lot of times we hyper focus on just the blood results or the urine results, and we forget that we can, sometimes that can take months to start to see changes in that. But those things like swelling and edema and blood pressure and blood sugar control and your bowel movements and your weight and energy levels, like those are all things that you can measure on, a daily or weekly basis and see improvements. And it's more motivating too, because you're encouraged, you see it physically. And then when your labs come a few months later, then you're able to have more reassurance that what you're doing is helping you. And everyone is different. I think some people might see things more quickly in a month. Some might be 3 to 4 months. And some people, it might be even longer, but it's everything that you're doing, your food and lifestyle changes are helping to protect your kidneys and your heart. And, that's what we hopefully want to encourage you guys to stick with it and keep with it, because everything that you're doing and making an effort to do, it's making a difference in your health and protecting your kidneys. So I think that's it for this episode on proteinuria. Again, listen back to episode 17, which was part 1, and then this is episode 18, which is part 2. A lot of information, but we hope that you guys find it helpful. Anything you want to finish with?
No, I think thank you very much for your support. We continue to grow, and we're really, really grateful for you guys spreading the message.
Yeah, we'll see you guys all next week.
Thanks, guys.